I'm wondering whoever looks at those recordings and what for.
Yeah, sometimes people do. I certainly have. In fact, there was a not too distant past one, right, Cornelia, where it was very helpful to look at a past recording.
Yep.
Not so much a he said, she said, or what they said, or whatever, but more like, it's just good to, it's easy to have miscommunications. So it's good to have something to look back on.
And I think that in something like the CNCF, these types of collaborative activities, it's really important that folks who aren't able to attend for whatever reason can not only look at the notes, but look at the dialogue that led to those notes. That gives important context. So
yeah, exactly. In fact, there was an issue today that I was going to reply to before this, but I'll just wait until afterwards, where someone was concerned about us having a time frame for the principles. And I'll respond there, so it's not just about a specific person, it's more just in case anyone has a concern like that. Maybe I should just address this well, actually, I'm sorry. I will put my note on the agenda and we'll just go according to agenda. I think we just have one main agenda for today.
I didn't realize you were adding this entry already, Scott. I added it up there. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, I was looking at the top of the document, not at the bottom.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Can you unlock the hack MD document so that we can work on that, or?
Yes. Yeah. So the goal was. Yes, we definitely will. So let's go ahead and do that now. And just I suppose I'll just say that the purpose of this, just for folks who are joining later, is to have several live sync sessions to arrive at an initial pre-release version of the GitOps principles. We said that in between we were going to lock the document so that it's just not because anything nefarious would go on, but just so that everyone would have a chance to be involved in these sync sessions. I'm going to go ahead and unlock it now. In fact, why don't I go ahead and share my screen to do so? So it's clear what's happening.
For example, I just felt the need to add a glossary about declarative, because we use declarative and we believe in declarative, but we don't actually say what it really means.
Yes. So everyone can write. Signed in users can write. Oh.
Yay.
Sorry, I'm going to unpublish this. Doesn't really matter, but there we go. Yes, everyone should be able to write. Sorry, give me a moment here. I'm not sure why it's giving me.
I'm getting a 403, forbidden.
Okay, so I think I just accidentally unpublished that. All right, now that was my mistake. Sorry, I haven't really bothered with that too much before. Okay, cool. So how about now? Do you have write access to if you're signed in?
Yes.
Back now.
Okay, great. Right, and so to be clear, for the purpose of this, and also just someone please chime in if this doesn't sound right or someone has something to say. For the purpose of this, we are not saying that there's a deadline for submitting these. Sorry, for publishing the first version of the GitOps principles. There's no, we have not set a deadline. There was, however, a target goal since last November for the end of May. And I have a PR open right now to just change that target deadline to be mid-April. It is not a deadline. It's a suggestion of a new target because we're already past that target. So that is all. I'm not necessarily asking for consensus here, but the PR is open if anyone wants to look at it and comment there. And I think the idea is that we said the idea here was that we will reach consensus. We are not trying to push any agenda. No one's trying to push an agenda on anyone else. It's the goal here is to find the common uncontroversial components of these principles for an initial pre-release. last time we had, oops, I think I'll just stop my share for now, unless it's helpful to anyone. But last time we had, the discussion was very, very good, but at a certain point, in order to ensure that everyone had an ability to speak, we started using raised hands. Does anyone have a preference on how we do that now?
I think we should continue with raised hands just for order.
Okay. That sounds good to me too. Does everyone know how to do it? Or does anyone not know how to do it? Okay, cool. Boris.
Sorry, just double checking you could actually raise a hand.
Okay, cool. Maybe I could help for now, just like take us back to where we were. I don't know if everyone here on the call was on the last one.
I couldn't.
Yeah, so, okay, right. So in the doc, oh, and just one more thing, sorry. Is it helpful for me to share the screen as the?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
I think that would be really helpful for you to share the screen of the doc,
Okay.
especially for the recording, actually, for people who can't make it.
That is a good point. Okay. No, okay. Can you see if this works? Can you see the HackMD doc now?
I can see your mouse pointer on a black screen.
Oh
Yep.
dear. Okay.
Yeah.
You may need to give permission to Zoom to view your screen through the accessibility setting on your Mac.
Well,
I
there was
think
something
that's
weird about the tab.
yeah.
Yeah, I think you may be right. I'll just do the antenna desktop. I'm not sure why. I've done it before, but I just won't hold people up right now. Trying to fiddle with things if I don't need to. Okay, so what I remember is that we had gone very.
It's still a black screen, Scott.
Oh, it is?
Yep.
One moment. One moment. Thank you. We do have the ability to share screen. Can someone else try sharing and besides
I'll
me?
go. I'll go to shut. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Yeah, here we go.
Oh, Bruce already did it. Okay, cool.
Okay.
You should be able to see this. So
Yes.
Maybe it was just my connection or something. Okay, cool. Thanks. Yeah. So what I remember is that we went through we went through the first 3 principles and have general consensus about them. Like certainly consensus about the first and the second. General consensus on the third, with the exception of with the one open question of whether or not there is some contention about the word continuous. And there is some contention about the word immediately within the text below. So the principle of so if someone just like chime in if you think that this is not a good summary, but what I remember is that there was a point of view that it's important that simply saying the principle of state reconciliation itself did not properly express the important value that GitOps brings. For instance, CI can reconcile. You can do manual reconciliation, etc. So there were some different points of view about that. I think there was an idea that using the word continuous and or perhaps immediately was implied a specific cadence. Immediately certainly does, but there was a question as to whether the word continuous implied that there would be a specific time period within which reconciliation would happen. And that is where we left it. There were different points of view on that, I think.
You could say regularly to emphasize that it happens on a regular base, but not necessarily continuously.
And I think, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't raise hand. Whoops.
My mistake. Give me 1 sec. I got to get to the participants list. Yeah, Christian was next.
Yeah, so I think the contention was the term reconciliation and loop and what is actually happening, right? The idea is that this is a reconciliation loop that happens versus a event-driven thing, right? And and I think there was a contention with loop because we were still discussing the idea of whether it's a closed loop or if it's an open-ended loop. And so, yeah, I don't remember why we didn't want continuous, and maybe that's why we kept it there. But I remember it was is to differentiate it between event-driven things versus reconciliation, right? Versus that loop. So I think that's what it was.
Okay, cool. I think Jesse is next.
I'm having both video and audio problems. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Cool, that's good enough. I know that there was some concern about the terminology. I feel like continuous is important. I feel like one of the things that I hear a lot, and actually maybe the biggest stumbling block for people really grokking what this is actually the continuous nature of reconciliation, convergence, state change, whatever verb you want to use, or noun rather. I think continuous is really important. I think loop can be dropped because that almost feels like an implementation detail. But I like, given the simplicity of 1 and 2, I like the principle of continuous state reconciliation. I think convergence is another term we could use, but then you have to bring convergence between desired and actual, and it gets a little more clunky. So I think my vote is for, the principle of continuous state reconciliation. I like that. I think it's elegant, and I think it can be explained.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Jesse. Leonardo?
Am I muted? No, I'm not muted. So I think another important aspect that we talked about last time was the difference. So we talked about whether continuous meant immediate or not. And around that, we also discussed, and actually Christian brought this up, that there's 2 possible causes for reconciliation. One is the introduction of a new version on an operating system, on an operating solution. The other is the reconciliation from drift occurring on an existing version, and that not necessarily both types of reconciliation require the same treatment. Because I think the primary point of discussion was not necessarily around the concept of continuous, but around the concept of immediacy. Whether having a new version of a given software being declared in a source control system, whether that new version should be immediately be reflected on a runtime, on the runtime of a system. And the difference lies in when it's an ongoing, when it's actually a drift in the system. Should drift in a system be immediately reverted or not? I do agree that continuous does not mean immediate. It means continuous. It means that there is a process always occurring to guarantee that state is consistent. So I think I do agree with the fact that there might be nuances in how reconciliation is dealt with, depending on whether it's a new version or a means to handle drift. That it should be continuous, that it should be automated, programmatic, but I think immediate is where there is more concern. I would say that for drift handling scenarios, immediate is important. For new version introduction scenarios, then immediate might be not applicable to all use cases.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And I'm thinking, thanks, Leonardo. And then, oh, I forgot one other thing, time-wise. We were saying before that we might want to put like just a basic time limit, but a kind time limit, like gentle time. Does that sound good to everyone? If we sort of say a 2-minute and then just give kind of a heads up, and if you need to wrap up, you can.
Seconded.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, then Brice.
Sure. One thing that is we can, the continuous and state and loop, all those are kind of have fairly complex concepts that we're bringing into a very quick sentence. I think we could just get away with simply saying the principle of reconciliation, and then have explicit details in the short summary of what that concept is. I think the principle of reconciliation kind of captures what we're trying to talk about without necessarily going into a lot of the details that would maybe be incorrect or slightly misleading. It captures the essence without any additional stuff. So that's number one. And number two is, yeah, I think there's absolutely a point of saying that immediacy is not possible in distributed system. I mean, it's not possible in any physical system, essentially. So we should, but it sounds like there's two things. There's number one and number two statements we make about this principle. And the first one and the second one are actually quite. So for the first one, continuous in this context is really about a continuously running process. And that might be made more explicit. For the second one, around the immediacy, I think that's really, I would remove immediately from that definition altogether, because it gives the wrong idea about the ought and is of systems, and the ought and what the system ought to do, which is immediate reconciliation, is not possible. And we should capture that reality in the definition.
Cool. Okay, thanks, Brice. Then Timothy's. Oh, and one quick second. I saw something I just read in the chat. What's the protocol for response? That's a good question. Maybe just raise your hand and take notes for yourself and wait until your turn, because if that makes sense. If we want something more elaborate, we can do that. But I feel like this is pretty simple, and it's. Sorry, Brice is done. Okay. All right. Let me know if you want to do something different. But otherwise, I believe Timothy's next, then Cornelia.
Thank you, Scott. So it looks like, it sounded like the last three gentlemen that spoke before me, I think we're all saying the same thing. And I actually want to pile in just to say that that makes a lot of sense, right? Continuous implies a lot of things, and actually it's a very good word for a principle, because you never know what people will actually end up implementing, right? And whether you want to do it through some kind of event-driven or some kind of reconciliation loop, that's pretty much all implementation details, right? And probably all use case driven. There could be certain times that some drifts are okay because your software is expecting to do something on its own, and maybe it's always trying to do something on its own, right? You don't have to correct them, but there are certainly cases such as things got changed manually, right? Got hacked or something like that, and you do definitely want the system to correct it. So I think that striking that the last two parts, right, the reconciliation or eventing, and also taking out the immediate makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Cornelia.
Yes, so I agree with remove immediately. I think it sounds like we're all in agreement on that. I argue for get rid of loop, but keep continuous, because the loop actually almost rules out events. And events is a perfectly legitimate way to initiate something. But if we get rid of loop and we leave open the possibility that it's only done by events and that there's some reconciliation, the continuous part, I think, is important to recognize that we're never done. And so I argue for, to summarize, get rid of immediately, get rid of loop, keep continuous.
Okay, thanks, Cornelia. Shlomo. Oh, I'm sorry, Jesse was next, but did you lower your hand, Jesse?
I did. I just made a text comment. I agree in all parts with Cornelia. She said exactly what I was going to say. Almost verbatim. Well done.
ESP. Okay, then Shlomo, do you still want your hand raised?
Yes. I also agree with Cornelia that getting rid of loop and immediate is a good idea. I'm also happy with the continuous part. And I think that keeping in the same kind of level of thought with the other principles, we should really think what is important for us to keep GitOps to be GitOps. Like, what are we willing to defend, and everything that we're not willing to defend, we should throw away. So, for example, we talked about it, but it's not in the text. GitOps means that it doesn't matter what caused the drift.
Sorry, that was not your timer. My mistake. Continue for a moment.
It doesn't matter what caused the drift. And that's also a fundamental difference to CIOps. And CIOps, only the change in the source code triggers a reconciliation. And the reconciliation is always one way. In GitOps, a change in the system can also trigger a reconciliation. This is a fundamental difference to CIOps. And I think we should actually put that into this third principle, that regardless of what caused the difference, or what initiated the difference, or whatever kind of, the result is always the same. We reconciliate.
Got it. Thank you, Shlomo. Well, at this point, Brice, and then Jesse, and then me, if you don't address what I was going to say.
So I think we're mostly in agreement in this call, but Moshe was the person who actually raised a lot of the concerns about this principle. I don't really want, so I'd want to make sure that we don't just reach consensus because the dissenting voice is missing. So I think like the idea of closed and open loops is relevant, and I think GitOps, as Moshe mentioned, it can be characterized as an open loop. I'm wondering whether, and we were in disagreement last week, right? Last time we talked, but I'm wondering whether it's worth highlighting that, and highlighting that the fact that most of the people here have a consensus, and that the dissenting voice isn't here. That's all. And maybe we can move to concrete proposal about the changes here. And I've already removed immediately, since that seems to be a universal consensus, and it was last week as well.
Thanks,
sorry, over to you, Jesse.
Thanks, Brice. Just in terms of moderation style, I just want to be clear that that we said initially up front that we weren't going to, this is not a voting mechanism, these meetings. So someone missing doesn't omit them. There will still be a pull request from this. The discussion from before is still recorded, and we can still have that open forum even after this. So I really appreciate you mentioning that, Brice, but I just want to be clear to anyone who might hear this starting now and not earlier, that that we have a mechanism built in to ensure that no one gets run over.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, Jesse?
I wanted to make an observation. I think we're arriving somewhere, which is good. Shlomo brought up drift, which I think is interesting for me. I was thinking the other day about how we might want to consider defining what drift is. This reminds me of quality theory, where everything's a regression, including building a new successful change and integrating it into the system. Still a regression because it's a change in behavior. I think if we can scope drift as really anything, the reconciliation part becomes continuous becomes mandatory. It becomes a mandatory descriptor to the reconciliation. I don't want to get pedantic, but I feel like reconciliation could be one and done. You can reconcile a situation and walk away from it forever. Whereas that to me is the root of why I think continuous is important. So I think I don't mean to be reiterating that, but wanted to add some context. That's sort of where my thoughts are.
100%, and I know I'm speaking out of turn, but 100%.
Yeah, we love reaction emoji, vocal or otherwise. I 100% that too. Okay, so then my hand's next. I'm going to put it down while I'm speaking for a second. Just time myself, but hopefully I won't need that much. I don't disagree with any of that. Do you see, I believe we're still sharing Brice's screen. Do you see down in the notes below this highlighted portion where it says principle 3, these differences could be due to the actual state drifting from the desired state or the desired state changing intentionally. We, in the last meeting, decided as we were working on the short form of these principles above that we would move those into notes below. It's still an open question. If we can get to that by the end of this meeting, that'd be cool. But it's still an open question about the style of that, whether those should be in glossary terms, whether they should be front-loaded in paragraph form above, or whether they should be inline in the principles themselves. I believe so far everyone seems to be on board with them not being inline and keeping the principles short. But I just wanted to highlight that one note because I think that that could be a place where we expand upon this, what was just discussed. Okay, cool.
Not emoji.
Okay, cool. Well, so we don't have any hands raised right now. Do we, at least on this call, and again, this is not the final say. We'll have a pull request and we'll have other things like this. But do we have consensus at this time that we? Oh, I'm sorry. There was one other quick thing, and I still do have a few moments. With what Moshe was saying before, we can't actually have a dialogue with them about this now, but we were talking about adopting terminology from systems theory. My only suggestion right now, at least for the context of this meeting, or this time, is that I want to suggest that we keep language. We don't adopt language specifically from systems theory at this moment in the short form of the principles itself. I think we should try to use as industry-wide and plain language as we can in the short form, or terminology that's very important to GitOps. And then, oops, I'm done. Well, gentle time, just to wrap up. And then I would like to move though, because I thought Brice, and other people thought Moshe's point was very good and important, that we do move to make a note in the notes section to go into that a bit more and to go into open and closed loops in the notes. Does that sound like some? Well, anyway, that is just a suggestion. I'm done. Oh, Brice, your hand's raised.
Yeah, so I just want to make a kind of a concrete proposal, right? We've discussed this. I think there's been a consensus around removing immediately, which I have done without really checking in. Should we, for the sake of kind of trying to make progress, should we then go ahead with, I think, which is the general consensus so far, which is the principle of continuous state reconciliation? I see a lot of people nodding on camera. Any dissenting opinion for now? To put that in the, yep, I can see Scott raising his hand.
Oh, only, yeah, I'm like doing a physical hand raise. I only just wanted to note that as long as we move that loop, like we're not really deleting it, we're just kind of copying it down into the notes section so that it can be expanded there instead.
Yep. Okay, cool. I see no dissenting voice, so I'm going to make that change. I think I will add a note around the loops. Second proposal is to, so we removed the third, it's highlighted on my right. Where is it? Yeah, the fact that this can be the state drifting from desired or desired state changing intentionally. The second proposal, and this might end up being a no, I suggest we move that back into the principles, unless we have a dissenting voice about that. We talked about it a lot, and it came up again today in the conversation as something that really matters as part kind of the core, the essence of what this is about. I see Cornelia and Leonardo raising their hands, so I'll give the floor to whoever's next.
Okay, great. Cornelia is next.
So I believe that we should 100% include that when we go into the details of the principle. But I kind of feel like it doesn't need to be there in the short form. It absolutely needs to be there in a longer explanation. So I think that's enough said. And I'd love to hear other folks. I like the short form being very kind of mathematical. Says we're going to do continuous reconciliation, full stop. And then there's all sorts of ways of, of triggers that will cause that reconciliation to require some action. And so calling out drift is only, I mean, there's not only two. And so it kind of feels a little awkward to call out one of those as a special case to elevate it up to this level. I'm done.
Got it. Thanks, Cornelia.
Could you elucidate on sorry, I'm jumping out of turn, but could you elucidate on other sources? So you said that we've only mentioned two, but there are others. What did you have in mind?
So something like a progressive delivery, when a progressive delivery is happening, so somebody has asked for a change by changing their declarative configuration, checking it into a Git repository. You now have a progressive delivery agent that is assisting in the rollout to that. Something goes wrong, and now there's it's not going to change the state in the running system. Now, what do? We could go back and say, we need to update the state in Git to reflect that we couldn't roll this out. But to me, that's almost a separate thing, is like there's this progressive delivery agent that is the cause of the dissonance. And it's not so much drift, and it's also not the fact that I've requested a new version. It's yet another thing. It's some more complex system.
Got it. Thanks, Cornelia. Okay, so then it's Leonardo, then me quickly, just as a very tiny note, then Jesse.
So a lot of what I was going to say, Cornelia said, so yes to what Cornelia said, and but I do think that the principle should, I really like the idea that who was it, Jesse talked about, and I think it's at a principle level to consider drift, or anything for that matter, that is cause for differences in state to be dealt with identically. Every other scenario, like every specific scenario of how that variance in state could occur, is beyond, is not a principle, is a detail. So it kind of like work the principles at a principle level. So any difference in state is a difference in state, period. Yeah, so that's kind of like my comment.
Okay, great. And sorry, Jesse, you can raise your hand again. I accidentally lowered it when I was trying to lower Leonardo's. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, so then my quick note, and then you, Jesse, is what about this as a concrete proposal, that when we say, we already say if the actual and desired states differ, automated actions are attempted to reconcile them. What if we say something a little stronger, like, or something a little bit more inclusive there, or at least to understand that there may be a bias that that the industry may already be assuming that they change because of there was a change in the code only. So perhaps we could say something like, if the actual and desired states differ for any reason, automated actions, et cetera. I'm just going to note this here, but I wanted to say it out loud. Thanks. Okay, Jesse.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said in the last couple of speakers, and I don't have anything specific on this, so I will happily defer. I have something else I wanted to bring up. So I don't know if we can just hold a place, or if we're interested in something else. It's related to principle 3. It's just basically wording.
Yeah, let's hold the place as soon as,
yes.
Why don't we get through this one piece? That sounds good, and then you're next.
Works for me, yeah.
Does anyone do we want to do emoji ops for the moment? Or just like hands up or voices for a second and say what we think, if it seems like we're in a place where, I would say this. First of all, I want to retract what I said before, because after hearing Cornelia's impassioned speech, I am, not that we have to agree on everything, but I do agree on that. I do think that the fact that we say continuous and that we say the desired and actual states differ, that should be enough. My suggestion for any reason is really just, it is not, for me, that's not a hill to die on. That is just an additional possible small augment that might address what other people are saying. So Question is, okay, so we've got a thumbs up, we've got 2 hands. Okay, let me call the hand. I've got 3 thumbs up. Okay, let me call the, got it, Brees, Jesse, Cornelia, and then Robert.
Yeah, I just wanted to vocalize the fact that I agree, and I think that the reason for for having the state reconciliation doesn't necessarily need to be in the text of the principle in itself. I think that the wording that's there is okay. I recognize that Jesse's going to probably say something about the wording right after me, but in itself, having a principle that says that we are trying to do state reconciliation, we don't need to pull in every single reason why that can happen. So I just wanted to say that I agree. I think that even if it's drift, if it's intentional, if it's whatever the reason why we are doing the reconciliation, that shouldn't be a principle. That just the fact that we're doing the state reconciliation is. And I think I was the first one to say leave out everything except the principle of state reconciliation. But I just also want to say that having the continuous there, it does sound like it's kind of necessary to get the point across, just simply because, like previously mentioned, state reconciliation can happen from many things, and just it can happen once, and that's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get a system running that controls the event of things here. So we kind of need that continuous to get it to make sense, I think. Yeah.
Got it. Thanks, Robert. Okay, then we're still holding for Jesse until after this one piece. Then Brees. Was your point about this part?
No. I think I'm like, let's move on to principle 4 and discuss that. Was my point.
Okay. Then because your hand was raised. Your hand raised for
that's why I raised my hand. No, that's why I raised my hand.
Oh, got it. Okay, then Jesse. Okay, great. Then it sounds like we are good then. Okay, so let's yeah, thank you. That's perfect. And then should we keep the for any reason in quotes, or do we like that, or do we feel it's unnecessary? Is there a gut response from the audience? I really don't care.
That's like part of why my hand's raised.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay, cool. So we got some
So
voices.
was that
perfect? Then Jesse, I think you're next.
Was that 2 I like it?
I believe
okay.
It was.
Okay, I don't like it, but I will actually agree with the quorum. That's fine. So the other thing I don't necessarily like, other than for any reason with a question mark, is attempted rather than taken or committed. I think I understand where that comes from, but the first 2 principles are quite they're blanking on a word. They're solid, right? Attempted raises kind of doubt, and I don't think that we would ever implement a system that attempts without the intent to take action, right? So I don't know if that got discussed before, but I think I'm proposing we swap that about for maybe taken.
Oh, sorry.
Seconded. Yeah.
I was failing my moderator duty for a second by thinking into space on my own.
You are, Scott, you're doing great.
Thanks. Okay, well then, Leonardo, was that so Brees seconded? Leonardo,
yeah, just a comment on that. I think in kind of like the real world, we for instance, when we think about the scenario that Cornelia pointed out, progressive delivery, and some goes off, right? Some doesn't happen, right? That will be an attempt that will not be guaranteed. And I think the actions that could be taken on a failed attempt are not necessarily to continue trying to reconcile. It could be notifying, it could be reverting, there could be any number of actions that could be implemented to achieve a balanced state again. I think the wiggle room of attempt in the principle might need some further elaboration, but I think it's fluid for a reason. And I think there's logic behind that fluidity of.
That's a good point.
Principle.
I was reading
Sorry,
actions as and
actually, go ahead, Jesse. You probably should respond, and then
oh,
Robert.
sorry, I
okay.
forgot. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I'm a chair of a school board, so I'm used to Robert's rules. If we want to go that way, so yeah, no. I very briefly, in support of what Leonardo just said. I think it depends on if you see actions as multiple and actions, or the action itself may fail and then you take another action. So something to think about, I guess. I'll off the rest.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Robert?
Yeah, I was just going to say that if the actual and desired state differ for any reason, automatic actions are taken, I think that makes sense. It might fail. There might be other actions that, you know, that there's a system set up to try to reconcile as well as possible, or, you know, pull in a actual human being to do things. But I don't think having I don't know the word, but such a flimsy meaning wording, having that in there doesn't make sense to me. I think that by definition, the principle is that we are doing state reconciliation. That action might fail. That's just how it is, you know, in real life. Something might go wrong, you know, and we might have other routines and actions that can be taken then. But that's not part of the principle. The principle is we're going to take action when things differ. Period. I feel.
Okay, thanks, Robert. So just getting the list, I had just one suggestion, and then it is Cornelia. Did you lower your hand then raise it again? Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so then I will say it's still Cornelia because it was raised initially, and then sorry, then oh, not Brees, you lowered your hand. Okay, Cornelia, sorry, then Shlomo, then Christian. All right, okay, so my suggestion is because it does seem like there's a lot of good points that we move that one note to the notes. That's the only thing I want to suggest, and that I like what was said before. I just wanted to voice it so that I'm also voicing things too as part of the group. But like I like what was said before, that it's important to note that we don't want to claim at this point that they will be reconciled, because that's too strong a statement. We can't say that they will be, but we could say actions are taken to reconcile them, just as it's here, or something similar. That's all I wanted to vote for. As long as we move the attempted conversation down to the notes, because there's some really good points there. That's it for me. Cornelia? Oh, I think you're muted.
Yep, I'm looking for the mute button.
Okay.
So I do think that attempted is going to cause all sorts of confusion. So I think attempted might be the wrong word. I do think that it is important for us, and the real point that I want to make, I like taken, by the way, but the real point that I want to make is that I think that we need to make sure that actions are considered separate actions, because the fact that doing some action, taking some action, which ultimately fails, puts us into a different state than we were before. And now the next action is responding to that state. And so I do think it's important that we don't try to say, well, we'll keep taking an action until it's successful. A failed attempt, so taking an action that ultimately results in failure, is within the rules. I think that is super important, is that we can't say that we can't define an action as it's not done until it's successful. A failed state is an okay state that puts us into a new state, which hopefully there's some other reconciler that can jump in and do something on our behalf.
That's a good note. I hope we can, it would be nice if we could sort of capture some of these. So if anybody feels like taking notes while I'm trying to moderate, that would be awesome. Even if it's just for later. Okay, so thanks, Cornelia. Then Shlomo, then Christian.
Yeah, so from the sound of it, I prefer taken. From the correctness, I prefer initiated. Because for me, there is a distinction between the reconciliation loop that only has the job to initiate an action. And it actually, I think, doesn't need to care so much about the result of the action. Maybe should avoid shooting multiple actions at the same time, like triggering multiple times an action being taken, and maybe have some little time to settle down and see if that helped. But for me, I think it's important here to really make it clear that the result of a difference in state is the decision to take action. And for me, the decision is the important part, that the system, the GitOps automatism has to decide, yes, I take an action. That's the core principle here, the automated decision. And then what exactly happens if it's an action that is being taken, triggered, attempted, or whatever, is, in my opinion, really secondary and much more on the implementation level. And the automation of the decision taking is at the core of this principle.
Okay, thank you, Shlomo. I also want to make sure that some of the comments in the chat don't get lost. I just want to, there have been some that have been missed, but I think most of them have been covered. If I'm missing something that's really pressing, please someone raise your hand and say so. But I wanted to mention one thing that Carlos said, unless you want to say this out loud, Carlos. Actually, I'm sorry, I don't want to ask you to say it out loud. I step back because we're doing hand raised things, but just saying that you had a suggestion of how we categorize it. This is not part of this discussion, so it's just categorizing things that are part of the principle or things that help define the principles versus not part of it, but an implementation detail. So I think that's good. We can keep that in mind. I hope that was a little helpful. Christian.
Yeah, I think a lot of what everyone said, I think I'm generally agreeing with. I actually do like initiated more than any other word. I was actually going to suggest maybe rewording the order of the sentence, but so my initial thought was, if the actual and desired state differ for any reason, an automated reconciliation is initiated. But now I think I only said it out loud so that way I can just hear it out loud. I think I may be backing away from that. I think I do like the initiated more than any other word. So I don't know.
Sorry to speak out of turn, but it sounds like we're reaching consensus on initiated.
It does. We've definitely reached on initiated. So now that, since no one else's hand was raised, I want to suggest that maybe just like, and this is like really kind of like polishing the brass here, but I would just rearrange that last sentence slightly, just to say automatic actions to reconcile them are initiated, because I think it's a little more clear. But you know, anyway, we can massage those kinds of things later. Was there another point that you wanted to make, Christian, or did I step in unnecessarily?
No, that was it. Okay. That was.
Okay, great. So then, yes, I think we're good there now for what we wanted to do. I believe Brice was up next for the principle number 4. We were kind of like keeping you in the queue, Brice.
No, that's all right. I just wanted to. I think we, as I mentioned in the comments, right? Like, I think these are, while we can keep improving this and polishing it and polishing it and polishing it, yeah. I think that's not necessary for a V1. And it generally captures what we all collectively think about GitOps. So I think let's move on to principle number 4. It's better to continuously improve than to be absolutely right the first time around, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Okay. Did you have something you wanted to say about Principle 4, or do you want to just like get on with it? That's the, okay.
Let's open it up.
Okay. Why doesn't everybody take a moment to read it? Just a time check. We have 4 minutes until our last note, so we're not going to have time for lengthy discussion around this one. I think we did for 3. That's great. Does anyone have any thoughts they want to voice? And if so, let's raise our hands and let's be really strict on time. Or maybe actually we only have 4 minutes. So yeah, any thoughts?
Leonardo, you raise your hand.
Yeah, just a very quick comment. The mechanism through which change is applied, I think change is a little bit ambiguous. We're always talking about state and configuration, and I think we should stick to that terminology. The mechanism through which configuration or through which state is applied to the system, something that is consistent with the wording that we've used in every other principle.
What if you call it to which state change is applied?
Okay, I'm raising my hand real quick because no one's hands were raised. I definitely feel some of the ambiguity that I'm hearing. Yeah, that people are picking up on different, some of these words have multiple meanings, right? For example, change sets and so on. In the very last principle, we talked about reconciling the system. Maybe we should just change the way it's said. We're not really talking in principle 4 about reconciliation itself. We're focusing on declaration here. So maybe we say the only mechanism through which the system is interacted with, or something like this. You know what I mean? And just kind of avoid that word altogether.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say it well, but you know what I mean. The actual state of the system. Yeah. And who said that before? There was
That was me, Shlomo.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess I'm basically going back to agreeing with you.
So we have a huge discussion, like I have a huge discussion with everybody whom I try to convince with GitOps, and they, after 2 or 5 minutes, come and say, but in an emergency, I cannot rely on GitOps to fix my system. So I normally say, well, yes, we talk about the 99.9999% of regular operations that we do. And in case of an emergency, we do whatever needs to be done. And then we think about reconciliation with the mess that we created in face of the desired state that we want to have. Just put in the notes. But my addition would be the only mechanism in the principle.
Seconded. I wouldn't use the word only, because we actually have a note about that in the PR. Yeah. Brice?
So in terms of, I think all the principles have are defining an ideal case and not every case. So for example, the idea that all versions are immutable and kept stored forever, I don't like retaining complete version history. That's great in principle, but actually there are edge cases that need to be dealt with. And I think it's okay for the principle to not necessarily talk like the short summary, which is what we're working on, to talk about those edge cases. In the case of immutable desired state versions, the edge case is if you, let's say, put a credential in your store, right, in your state store, or if you put personally identifiable information in your state store and you get a request to delete personal information. Like there's a lot of there's a lot of kind of subtleties and edge cases, and I think those are better explored in explanatory notes rather than in the short definition, because otherwise we're going to bring too much too quickly to somebody reading this. That's it. I'll pass on to Christian.
Thanks, Brice. Before passing on to Christian, I just want to do a temperature check for the room, because it is it is the top of the hour now. We could have a little bit of wiggle room so no one's just like cut off like mid-sentence. But I know that people do have other meetings to get to. My question is, Christian, is this kind of a good end cap for this, or would it be okay to put it in notes, or how do you feel?
We can just put in the notes. My only suggestion was maybe we should just remove that last part, not through it. Like don't even say yes or no, but just remove it. But that could be, we can discuss that next time.
Yeah, I feel like we have to pick this up where we left off next time. It's too for us to make any concrete decisions.
Cool. Okay, well then thanks everyone for joining, and we are pretty good on time. Amazing conversation. We'll see you, this will be recorded, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for the awesome moderation, Scott.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Scott.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks a lot.